Hi, I'm Cathy with Quilt Beginnings in Dublin, Ohio, and we are back for month 7 of our Kona block of the month. We've really come a long ways, but we're starting to get a lot of overlapping techniques from things we've done before. This month is called Sea Stars. So here's your kit, and here's the quilt, all the beautiful fabrics. And just like always, when you pull it out, they're in the order of the color that are on your sheet when you open up your kit. So you can pull out your color sheet and match up your fabrics and make sure you label them, because I'm sure you know by now they're really close in color and it's a lot easier if they're labeled. This one is very similar to the one we did a couple months ago. Let's see, where is that one? This one. It's very similar to this, where we have the alternating block that creates that great diagonal. The squares, the stars are slightly different, and the checkerboarding is slightly different, but we're going to do some really similar techniques with it, especially when we do the 9 patch with the frame around it. They have you cut, again, all these individual squares, and that's a very time-consuming and not a really precise way of piecing those units. So we're going to go ahead and strip piece those as well. In addition, they have you make half square triangles here. You could convert that and do a flying geese like we did in month 5, but we're going to go ahead and use half square triangles again. They have you start with squares that are a little bigger than what you're going to finish at, and then they have you make the unit and trim it down. You know me, I never like doing things that I have to trim down after I sew. So we're going to go back and use triangle paper again. So we'll do a quick review of that technique. We did it pretty thoroughly in month 1, so if you have questions about it or you want to understand how to do it and see all the actual sewing, go back to month 1 and you can review that. We're going to start with the star blocks. And so the star blocks, there are 7 different colors of stars, and you're going to make 3 of each color. And so I'm going to show you with 1 set of fabric, and then you will carry on and do the remaining, get all 7 sets done. So let's start over at the cutting station. So as you know, triangle paper is my friend, and we want the stars to finish at 2.5-inch squares, the star points to finish at 2.5-inch square. So I'm going to use half square triangles that finish at 2.5 inches. Can you see that? Is it backwards or is it right? I think it's right for you guys. Okay, so anyway, it's 2.5-inch finished triangle paper, and we pull out the roll like we've done before, and every unit here gives us 4 half square triangle units. So we need to get 24 for our star blocks, because each star block is going to use 8. We're going to make 3 blocks of each color, so we need a total of 24. That fits very nicely if we count 4, 8, 12, 16, 20, 24 on a half of a piece of fabric. So I cut my fabric 7.5 inches wide, and I cut it once on the fold. From there, I'm going to take the triangle paper. I would go ahead and cut it off with that 24. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. I'm going to cut right on the line. And then we would always put our right sides together. Whoops, I don't need 8. So sorry, I need 6. I don't count very well. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Cut this part off. Good thing it's only paper. Okay, I'm going to cut that off, and I'm going to lay it on top of my fabric, and I'm just going to put 3 pins in the center of each of them. I'm going to take it to the sewing machine, and I'm going to sew on every dashed line all the way around. I'm going to pivot around my fabric. I'm going to come back up, and I'm going to make sure I do the inside and the outside. I've already stitched these because you guys are now professionals at doing this triangle paper. So if you've done it correctly, you will see parallel paths of lines, and you want all of the stitching lines to be completed. And then I'm going to pull this aside, and I would go ahead and trim on all my outside edges. This cutting mat's a little bit small, so I'm just going to trim off what I need for 1 block, which would be 8 of them. So I'll take this, 2. So this is enough for 1 block. I would cut all those down as well, but you don't need to see me do that. And then I would cut on every solid line. And then on the diagonal lines as well. right, so we have our 8. After we get them all cut down, we're going to peel the paper off, which is my favorite part. We just tear it to the middle, tear, and pull off. Okay, so I have all of my half square triangle paper pulled off, and now I want to press half of these to the light and half of these to the dark because they're going to nest a lot nicer together when I do it that way. So I'm going to go ahead and just press for one way and for the other for each star. Okay, the last thing we need to do to finish up our half square triangles is go ahead and clip the dog ears off of all the corners. So I'm going to clip and make everything squared back up. And these at this point should be 3-inch square. We don't have to do any additional trimming. When they get stitched into the quilt, into the block, they will be 2.5-inch finished, which is exactly the size we need. So out of the remaining half of that 7.5-inch wide strip, I cut the 3 5.5-inch squares that I'm going to need for my star centers. And then we're also going to need some 3-inch squares of our background. So you will need to cut 3-inch strips, exactly what they told you in your pattern. For the background, it's 6 3-inch strips, and then you need 84 3-inch squares. So I just cut a strip, and then I'm going to subcut it into 3-inch squares. Cleaning off all my raw edges. And then there's 3, 3, and 3. All right. And I will need 4 of these for my 4 corners, 1 of these, and my 8 star points. So let me just go ahead and lay out my block. And we want to make sure that we put the opposite direction ironing so that these will nest together. So this one pressed that way, this one pressed that way. This is towards the blue, this is towards the white. And then towards the blue and towards the white. It doesn't matter which is on which side, as long as they nest. And then the blue and the white. There is our block. We're going to end up sewing it in rows. So I also, I usually like to start the star points together first. So I'll take all 8 of those, sew those together, and then I'll come back and sew in rows. These nest so perfectly together when they are ironed. With the seams going the opposite directions, you get really beautiful points. Love it. Okay, put these back on. Okay, I've got my top and my bottom row. I'm going to press my everything towards the solid squares. So my bottom and top row will go out to the little square and out to the little square. And then my inner row will go to the big square, press towards the big square. You can see everything just fits together so nicely. You get these beautiful points. And then this will go on, and this will go on. Our seams will be opposing, so it should go together really easily. We'll be right back. Give our block a final press. I'm going to press out towards the wings. And there is our first star block. Only 20 more to go. All right, so let's come back over to our quilt. Here we are. And you can see that these are going to go right in here. What's really nice about this star block, just like it was with our one in month 5, is the 9-patch seams do not interfere or intersect with the points of the stars. They're a little bit offset, and what's beautiful about that is it doesn't really matter what way we press these seams on our star, and it's not really going to matter on our 9-patch either. So we're going to get a lot more efficient with doing our 9-patch little thread there. We're going to piece our center, strip piecing 1 blue strip with 2 white on each side. Then we're going to do the same thing for the top and the bottom. And then we're going to put a 6.5 inch piece of white and strip piece it with 2 blues on the outside. These blocks do alternate where these 2 colors are. So half of the blocks have the dark blue in the middle and the lighter blue on the outside. The other half are inverted from that. They have the dark blue on the outside and the light blue on the inside. So I think you'll see we'll just do half one way and half the other. Okay, so now we're ready to do our 9-patch block, and instead of cutting and piecing these individual squares, we're going to strip piece all these units. So for my center, I would take the blue, which is in every center, and I'd take a strip of that, and imagine that this is a long strip, but I'm just doing this for illustration. But I would sew 2 white 2.5, or background 2.5 inch strips to my center square, and I press towards the center square. And then I'm going to subcut those into 2.5. I'll do that in a second. I did the same thing with the next block, and I'll need 2 of these for each one of these. And then I lastly did the outside. All of these are strip piece. So just go ahead and instead of subcutting everything into 2.5 inch units, keep them in long strips and sew those long strips together. Then when we're ready to cut them, I can lay my, my dark squares with my light, and I like to nest them together when I go to cut them, because then they are totally ready to be pulled apart and sewn, and then I'll have extra because I'll need the other half of the block. So I'll go ahead and cut this up, and I'll cut it every 2.5 inch increment. And again, you would cut an entire strip of this because you're going to need quite a few units. But there's half of my block, and then I can pull this apart. And I didn't make this quite long enough to be doubled up, but you'll at least get to see the block. So here's my top and my bottom. Whoops. This will be a top and a bottom. I'm going to sew, and I'll be right back. So it's already nested together. It doesn't matter which way I press, but those were all lined up, and then I come back and I put the back side on it. Then I'm going to do the same thing. I'll join those, and I'm going to do the same thing with this, cut it at 2.5 inches. And I'll just cut what I need for this block. And then this is going to go on the top and the bottom. Let's get this all put together for you. The inside square of my block, and I'm going to add this to one side and this to the other. But in order for that to fit, I'm going to need to put a 6.5 inch background piece on each side. So those are cut separately. So I'll add it in like this. So I'll go ahead and join those together first, and then I'll sew my 2 sides on. And then to make my seams go the opposite direction, I'm going to need to press this towards the squares. So I'll go ahead and press both sides in. Our block is almost done. Make sure I nest those corners together. And then I come down and nest the bottom one. And just give it a little pinch. And there we have our alternating block. Pretty easy. Just remember that in half of the blocks you'll make 9 that are in this configuration and 9 that have these 2 fabrics reversed. Okay, so we have all of our inside put together. We've added our inner border on, and now it's time to attach our outside border and to get these nice miters in the corner. So I have one block that I put together, and I just added the inside border for you because the critical part of this process is getting this angle right. So I'm going to show you how I tackle that corner. You would need 2 strips sewn together to make your border long enough for your quilt. I'm just going to work with 1 because I'm just going to really focus just on this corner. When you get your 2 strips sewn together, you would fold them in half, and so pretend this is half of it. And then I would match the center half of my quilt. So put the center of your 2 and let it extend over. So you're going to need surplus up here at the top, and you're going to need the same thing with surplus coming out the side. Let me grab this piece. So this one, you would find the center of your quilt, and then this would be a much longer piece, but it's going to hang beyond the quilt like this. What we care about when we're sewing this is getting ourselves to stop a 1/4 inch. Let's go back over to the cutting station so you can see a little bit. Bring that into the middle. We need to have our borders coming up this way and over this way. Okay, so they have extension above and beyond the quilt. I'm going to start with one side. It doesn't matter which side you put on first, but the trick is that you need to stop a 1/4 inch below where this top of this is. So you can mark it with a pen. I'm going to just get a straight pen, and I'm going to put a 1/4 inch inside and a 1/4 inch from the corners. So right here, a 1/4 inch from the top and a 1/4 inch from the side. Can you guys see that? Let me put that up, pull it up. Can you see? Yep, so you want it to go right in that 1/4 mark. And you're going to put a pin there, and that's where you're going to start and stop sewing. So you're going to start and stop right in that juncture point. And then you're going to attach it all the way down the side. When you get to the far end, it's going to hang over that end as well, just like it does here. You're going to leave plenty at the top, more than the width of this. So it needs to extend beyond this one when it's attached. And then you're going to stitch from this 1/4 inch all the way down to a 1/4 inch from the bottom of your ending of your top. So I'm going to go ahead and sew this on. I do like to do a little back stitch in here. And it might be easier for you to have the quilt on the top. I'm going to have to put the border on top. And so I just know that I marked that spot. I'm going to put my needle down in that spot. I'm going to come forward 2 stitches and then go back 2 stitches just to lock it there. I'm going to come on. I would sew all the way till I get to the very end of my bottom, and then I'm going to stop a 1/4 inch shy. So wherever that is, you're going to stop a 1/4 inch as well. I'll sew this down. Remember, I'm just pretending to work on a whole quilt. Okay, and then I'm going to go ahead and press towards the border out like this. I'm going to flip it over so you can see I'm shy of this corner. I want this one to start in that same spot. So I'm going to fold this this border out of my way, and I'm going to lay this one on top, and it needs to extend as well. I want to make sure I don't catch this one though, but it needs to extend over, and I'm going to start sewing in that same spot. And you can flip it over if it's easier for you to see. And you come back to the sewing machine. You want to start sewing where the other one stops sewing. Actually, I was a little deep. I need to come a little bit further down, just a 1/4 inch. You want to make sure you stopped at a 1/4 inch, and this one has a little bit longer than that. So I'm just going to come and give it a couple stitches. Perfect. Okay, then I'm going to put this other one on. Make sure you pull it out of the way. Put your other binding on, other border on. Make sure you have a long tail. It's kind of tricky to show this on a video. Okay, so I want to start sewing right where I stopped sewing before. And I'm going to do a couple reverse as well. And then I'm going to sew all the way to the far end. And the same thing, I'm going to stop a 1/4 inch shy. So we'll assume this is the end of my quilt. And stop 1/4 inch shy. And back up. Okay. All right. So this is what we want. We want to have an L in this corner of sewing. Sorry, there's a lot of threads in the way, but basically want an L there. I'm going to go over to the ironing board. I'm going to press this one out as well towards the border. And then I'm going to lay these together. And I'm going to take my top one and I'm going to fold it back 90 degrees so that it matches this corner. Oops, I have a thread here. It's going to match this corner and it's going to parallel along the border there. And I'm going to iron that. It's going to tell me that ironed line is where I need to sew for my miter to be a perfect miter. And this is one of those rare times when I actually do pin, because I don't want this fabric to slip. And you're working with the whole bulk of your quilt top, so it's got some weight to it. So I just want to pin in the direction that I'm going to sew. And I'm going to open this up and not disturb anything. So I'm pinning on both sides of the line. You can see here I'm going to just kind of fold this center into like a V to get it out of the way, because what I want to do is sew from this stitching line out on that line that I just pressed. I'm going to put another pin in for good measure. All my pins are broken. Does that ever happen to you? They're all bent. I'm going to put another one in for good measure. Okay, this is how you do an inset seam too, but see how I pulled the inside of my quilt out of the way? I don't want it to get in that seam, and I'm going to sew from this corner out to that corner. I'm going to start right where all those seams are meeting. With my foot, I don't think I quite got it. and just sew right up that edge. This is the moment of truth. We're going to open it up, and when we press it, we'll have a perfect miter there. There you go. And then we would go ahead and trim the surplus fabric. So you're going to go ahead and lay your 1/4 inch ruler on that line that you just sewed. So I'm putting the 1/4 inch of my ruler on it and then trimming off the excess. And there you have a nice miter. There we go. All right, so I think we finished for today. The next class we'll be doing will be on our Mojave. It's lavenders with a dark nautical blue background. And I hope you guys have a lot of fun with this. Good luck with those miters. If you have any questions, give us a call, and we'll see you next month. Bye.